last meeting that David, Poppy, and Jerry are gonna be.
Well, I guess.
Well, one of us will be gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to sit down and figure out who does what committee, so that's
Right.
this array of committees.
Yes.
So,
That will be sort of after November 5th.
yeah.
Well, November 1st.
November 1st.
It's on the 5th.
First.
It moved from the 5th to the 1st?
I think it originally was the 5th, and then I think, didn't Kelly say like Islands Trust me was doing their swearing in?
Oh, that's what it
On that
was.
day, I think that's what she was telling Sue Ellen.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what happened
Mhm.
then.
And then is there counselor school?
A little bit later, about mid-month, eh?
The 13th, there's, the next, I guess, that's the first real meeting, I guess.
Yes.
Sharon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was meeting, I don't know. Ask me tomorrow at noon.
You're our new leader.
Maybe.
Camera's on.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Steph. We're gonna give David one more minute, or are we gonna dive in? What time is it?
7:01.
Fine, I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Awesome.
First item of business is the approval of the agenda with the proposal to make a minor amendment and alter the order of items 4 and 5. Do I have a motion? Dennis, second. David, all in favor? We are unanimous. And the second item is adoption of the minutes of the September 17th meeting. Do I have a motion to adopt those minutes? All right, Martin?
Yeah.
And second,
I'll second.
David, all in favor? David's in favor and everyone else is ambivalent. Okay. So item 3 is a public comment opportunity, so why don't we take that opportunity?
Yes.
Have our-
You need 2 chairs there? Jocelyn, you coming to the table? Yes. Okay, I'm gonna move this over, so I'm gonna move you a little bit to the left now. There you go. Jocelyn, I'm coming into your left. And, oh, stop for a sec. And, okay. All right, there you
Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Is it Alex?
Alex
Yeah.
and
Jocelyn.
Hi, Alex. Hi, Jocelyn. Welcome. So you come to speak to us about the
about
Lodge.
380 Cardigan Drive, otherwise known as the Bowen Island Lodge.
okay.
And I'll begin and Jocelyn will conclude. First of all, thank you for having us here for public comments. And to really dive right into the issue, since we want to definitely respect your time here. We, going back and understanding the issue of the Bowen Island Lodge, who have a rezoning proposal that will be coming before this committee and has been referred by council, we need to look at some of the history. To look at its origins in the early 60s. The lodge was originally established by the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, with significant contributions from other organizations at the time as a training, meeting, and recreation center, meaning that in the winter it would have the summer camps that many of you thank you. In the summer, there's the summer camps that many of you have been familiar with from many years at CNIB has done them, and maybe later from when it had been taken over by another organization. And then in the winter, though, and this is a lesser known fact, that people who are blind could come and learn the skills that are needed to live independently. It remains to this day the only protected building of its kind in Canada. That protection came from a covenant put in 2002 that gave the residents of the Smith Point neighborhood certain rights, as well as people with disabilities' principal use of the facility. It is both in the zoning and in a covenant that runs with the land. As In more recent years, as more and more of what they call accessory use groups, which is not groups made up of people with disabilities, have been using the facility, the amount of complaints around Snug Point have increased. And there is even a open complaint currently that is actually quite affected by this rezoning application that I firmly believe needs to be closed before rezoning can take place. I do not believe that the rezoning should go ahead in either case, as it does trample on the rights of people with disabilities, something that are hard fought for and won in this country, and of which there is still a lot of work to do. So to trample on the few that we do have is not excusable to my way of looking at it. There's misinformation circulating that there's no interest from the blind community in using the facility, but there is many organizations that are definitely interested in using it for that purpose that currently can't, given how things are going with the current owners and the proposed rezone. Thank you. Oh, sorry, one other thing. It's been brought up in the past that the covenant holds no enforcement of its own. It does actually enforce itself through ensuring that the only economical viability for that property is by ensuring that the principal use group is accommodated. So by ensuring principal use is the only way that that can be used as a viable property that is a very powerful thing in its own right. And I thought I should bring that to your attention. I'll turn it over to Jocelyn.
All right, so the benefits to using this facility the way it was intended to be used and is currently being protected to be used, it provides many benefits. Of course, it fits in right with the residential nature of Snug Cove, as opposed to like more something that would have a lot of noise and you know, a lot of parking for the blind community to use it, and it has been, you know, successfully used in the past this way. There's minimal cars. Most blind people do not drive. There is you know, there's been an over 50 years of a group of people who respect this island and respect the community, and so things like the noise complaints are fewer because they actually, you know, it's something that they care about. This is, you know, to many a home away from home, and is a place that is respected, and yet you still get the benefits of that are equal to or greater than what you see with tourism, because you still have people going from the facility, going shopping at the stores, eating at the restaurants, and contributing to the local economy. So you have, you know, more respectful visitors to the island that are still bringing the benefits. And there have been some misunderstandings as to, you know, if these protections of the covenant are removed, well, people with disabilities can still come. But that is not ensure that they can. It removes the protection of, you know, what is designed for, and the fact that, you know, you can in a school, it is not a school because they allow children to go. It's a school because it has these activities going on, and children are being educated. And so the point is not whether or not people with disabilities are allowed to go to this facility, but rather what it is meant for, what it was designed for, and what it should continue to be used for. And this rezoning should not go forward, and if it does, it will trample on the rights of people with disabilities and the surrounding neighborhood. Thank you.
I will add one more point, dovetailing on something. Jocelyn said that the benefits of tourism being equal to or greater than, whereas Bowen as a community has tourism primarily in the summer months, use of the facility all year round for such activities would also, for persons with disabilities, would also ensure that those same respectful visitors are here all year round contributing to the local economy.
Things such as training do not need to happen during the summer. So, yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you guys.
Jocelyn, can you give your last name, please?
Gladys, GLADYSZ.
Alrighty. Moving on to our next item of business, which is now new business. We're going to be looking at the medical clinic. Dan, you want to walk us?
Sure, so there's no presentation, I believe, so, but I'm just gonna talk you through it. So essentially this is a fairly straightforward bylaw, and that it would add medical clinic as a use to the Village Commercial 1 zone, so that's the zone basically for Snug Cove. Is also the zone for the majority of Lot 3, and so the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation approached the municipality looking to be sited on Lot 3 of the community land, so immediately adjacent to the fire hall, the clearing for the fire hall, so all roughly on about half the site of the current commuter parking lot. So council agreed, resolved to enter into an agreement to lease a portion of the land for them. And so, yeah, and so the foundation's received its charitable status, so we're in the process of entering into a lease agreement with them for a portion of Lot 3. But as part of that, it was noted that medical clinic isn't a permitted use on that portion of Lot 3. So council initiated a rezoning to allow the use of medical clinic on there, but then we thought, okay, we'll include it in the whole village commercial zone, so that it'd be a permitted use everywhere. So Judy's prepared that bylaw, and then with the bylaw as well, it just puts the parking requirement in as well to essentially match what's required for commercial spaces in the village commercial zone.
Is there an intention to subdivide that parcel and attach uses to the subdivided pieces? Or are they, is it going to be just a CD kind of?
So there's intention to subdivide, but to leave them within the village commercial zone. So the fire hall is zoned separately. So on page 14, the VCI is right at the top, the institutional is for the fire hall, is zoned institutional, the remainder is zoned village commercial. And so over the summer, Judy, our planning consultant, met with architects for the fire hall, for the proposed health clinic, and for an organization called Birch, which is Robin Fenton, which is an affordable housing group. There's also approached, and council has endorsed providing a portion of Lot 3 for them. So the three groups essentially met to work out like a layout plan for the lot. So initially, sort of people had come with, like the fire hall came and said, we want this part at the end, and the health clinic said, okay, we want the next chunk down, and then housing said, we want the next chunk down. So Judy organized meetings to meet with all the architects to say, okay, let's figure out a plan that actually works for everyone, that isn't just based on like dividing it. So essentially, the fire hall would remain with this blue area. But then the VC1, that blue chunk,
That's
At
the
the
fire hall.
top, yeah.
at the top, but then there'd be one entrance, roughly where the mailboxes are now, that would come in and then could split for the health clinic to be roughly that top corner of the VC1, so against the park back but against the blue where the fire hall is, and the housing to be behind the RCMP buildings. Thank you, Steph.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, with area in front essentially to replace, to be parking for the fire hall, but also to replace the commuter parking. So see it being complemented here, and housing roughly with an entrance here, the split to go for this parking lot to go to the housing in the back.
So the shared access is between the housing and the clinic, not between the clinic and the fire hall?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a Las Vegas strip approach to the parking, so there'll be parking in front of the building? Is that,
Yeah.
can that be changed? could parking be behind the building?
So the health clinic was quite,
Pieces.
Sorry.
so quite keen on the proximity to the park. That was sort of their key takeaway from it. But that was their prime location, was to be adjacent to the park,
And why
rather
was
than
that?
adjacent to the road.
Why was that?
Sorry?
Why was that? Why did they want to be next to the park?
I think they would rather be overlooking the park than closer to Miller Road.
Yeah, okay. As opposed to maybe using it for therapy or something like that. Walking, and I don't know.
So the building would be a single-story freestanding building that would have a clinic in it, is that?
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be 2-story.
You're right. So they've had a couple of different proposals. I'm not sure in the final one if it's a 1 or 2 story.
So there will
But
be
it would
some,
be single use in terms of the clinic, like in terms of they would have different uses, like different offices or whatever, but just a clinic building.
so there would be some kind of administration offices or something,
Yeah.
and it's the people occupying those offices that want to be next to the forest, not the people coming to get prescription or to see a doctor or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
I just, because that seems like a,
We're just trying to bring it up here, but I think,
Don't look at it yet, give me a second.
yeah,
I'm only, and I know this is a bit of a pester of a
Yeah.
detail, but it seems to me a shame to take away from the road. Like, I think it's really easy to take a strip mall approach to development, and if we start down that road, which we've already sort of done, I mean, the general store is a good example of that.
Yeah.
Where, you know, if all of the Cove looked like the general store, we wouldn't have a very happy development. So that's a bit of a
Yeah.
concern to understand. That may be outside of our purview, I don't know, but I'm just kind of
Yeah.
interested in the proposal as a totality.
Well, there is a master plan that's been put together.
Stuff's just pulling that up.
So it's from the
we're
power
trying to
company?
find it here.
Is it this one?
Well, we look for, is there a
Is there any
specific,
picture there? No.
Right,
Because this is just, like, the referral is just for this bylaw change as opposed to Judy's other report
I
about.
was just trying to find that
yeah,
the one that showed that Judy had with
Yeah.
the presentation in it, that we changed.
So I need some parameters, like where am I looking?
Yeah, I don't know.
as we look for it, is there a specific reason why medical clinic use was not included in the zoning
So,
initially? Is it just an
yeah.
oversight, or? is it
I would say more so initially, like the village council zone allows for offices and allows for general services.
it sort of seems like a compatible use
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. And then when the rezoning of Lot 2 was done, so that was in 2014, it created a medical clinic definition in the Lot 2 zone. But in part by doing that, it then excludes it in other places.
Right.
So if we didn't have a medical clinic definition at all, we would probably say, well, the medical clinic fits within roughly the office and general services. Somewhere in there it'll fit. You know, we already have doctor's offices in it. In
So, Martin, so the triangular parcel that's for sale,
Mhm.
that's the one that
Yeah.
originally was envisioned for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I would say the why
So
it's
it's
not
just a
there.
technicality, really.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why when the health clinic wanted to go forward in that portion, we said, well, no, it might make sense to just include it everywhere. If somebody else said, we want to do a health clinic now on the site of wherever, the gravel parking lot, we would probably be okay with that too.
Yeah, I'm really with Drew on the concern, and I know we can't address it now, but we do have a couple of future members of council here. So would like to take a look at it, because I agree that that's really sort of not a low-end development pattern we want to encourage. And you know, the other thing, of course, is that there's always the possibility of maintaining some woodland, sort of like you screened the parking that was added down there.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to bring this plan up, just so you can have a look at it. I mean, obviously, we thought it was pretty good. We rearranged some of the parking and that sort of thing, but.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
So I mean, I guess there's sort of two parts to this. One is a conceptual agreement to the the clinic being located on this parcel. It seems, it's difficult to tell, but it seems that there's quite a bit more parcel has been allocated to the clinic than to housing, is that correct?
No,
No,
No? Is it-
I guess it's mostly parking, really, and then
Right.
housing, and then.
Mostly parking, a little lozenge of a,
And so the change that took place when it came to council the last time, so Judy had prepared figures that Steph will pull up. Council instead asked that the parcel be, so the parcel before, Judy had sized it so that it would fit the health clinic plus the required parking for the space. And instead what council asked for was that the parcel be made simply the size of the building, and that the future parking actually be on the property retained by the municipality. And that we yes, thanks, that's great.
I see.
Are we good?
yeah, we are, so.
Right, so that's
Yeah.
the revised one, yeah.
So this, that's the parking.
Yeah.
you got that nice green one?
That
So
one,
that's, yeah, it's quite a bit more in there for housing.
No,
That's not there.
green, great.
So
That
the
one's
parking
on-
for the
that's on.
housing would also be in that Bowen Island parcel?
no, it would, no, it would be on the.
Parking for Birch was all, there was parking along here, and along the units, the whole thing here was a housing unit. And then this is all parking. Originally, the medical center had the parking right out to the street,
Mhm.
and then we decided to pull that back and just keep that as muni parking. And they have an option of getting more parking if they need it in the future.
So this parking is not,
So,
or it is?
It is, but it's owned by the municipality.
Right, and so this is also a parking lot for
Yes.
Smart Code?
Yes.
So when it's full of commuters parked cars, there's no.
No parking. So.
Right.
Yeah, there was also some parking in here. There's another slide there. So.
So is there gonna be some dedicated parking to the medical center?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah. They'll have parking in the front. You see, this is parking here.
Right,
Parking. And then this was originally, I think, parking for the medical center here, but they're gonna have all these. What's
So those are non-commuter spots.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. They'll be dedicated for the.
wow,
Well, if you have
that's
3 or 4 people working there, that's half your parking. If they drive, yeah.
a pretty dismal prospect on the road too. I mean, the parking stalls are right up to the property line on effectively the edge of the
Yeah, I
road.
agree with that point. It's not the most ideal
No.
from a design perspective, for planning, not defining the street edge with a building.
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of, I think, that was my first comment, was my hope was to see the building out here
Yeah.
and the parking around behind it, so it doesn't have the presence on the road, right?
If that has a presence in the park, and that's the
Well,
trade.
but, you've got trees,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well,
to do some.
Put
street-
trees along the front too, obviously. Excuse me.
Well, there'll be Bob's trees, because they're off the property, they're on the road, the parking comes right up to the property line.
The fire hall will also have a forecourt that will be more parking effectively,
Right.
like space, right? So,
Yeah, is the fire hall still a drive-around, drive-through scenario?
Yes.
So we're talking about like acres of asphalt here.
right.
Yes.
Lovely.
Mhm.
Um,
Theoretically, the parking won't be in the fire hall very often. It's just that you have to have that many spots for an emergency situation.
Right. But nevertheless, they've got a whole lot of paved area going all the way around 3 sides of their building, because they feel.
Yes.
like- Even so, 90% of the fire halls in the lower mainland are one-side access only. I don't get that at all.
Well, it's because they have more fire halls.
Do you want to go get their picture?
Yeah.
Or give it this picture?
So, is the APC going to see this again, or is this our opportunity?
No.
I mean, so this is the referral for the bylaw
yeah.
that's with you, to add medical clinic as a use.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
put medical clinic in there, that's all.
Okay.
Nothing's been decided on any of the rest of this. It'll obviously come back to the APC once something's a little bit more solidified.
Is that correct? Is that how the process?
So there's
is?
no rezoning required or anything, why, would it still come to us, or?
I mean, that would be up for council, but in terms of the lease, I don't believe that it would come.
No?
Yeah.
So you can see it's not a like land use bylaw.
Right, so this is our opportunity to comment on the development proposal in total then. I mean, and you may not want to open the door to that, but you put the slides up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how far their design has come, and that's a very specific design. And it sort of occurs to me that maybe the building could come out toward the street. Maybe they even, heaven forbid, would have expansion space on the parcel. And then that starts to give more of an edge in there, and then parking, this becomes more of a parking court in here. I don't know, it's just another way of looking at it, and, because this really is, all this, and then, as you drive down Miller Road, it's all asphalt, it's awful. That's not a good image of the community, I don't think.
Need to pass a motion to have it, make sure that it comes back to the EPC for comment, but I don't know how fast this is moving, I don't see it moving very
Can-
quickly, that's for sure.
Can we encourage specific request?
Yeah.
They
that's
look
just-
at an option where
Well,
the
sure.
building is positioned relative to the street, closer to the street, and
Yeah,
I think we can couch it in any kind of terms we want to answer your question.
So we should do
I would
it
say so.
separately, yes to the technical
So-
change, and we want to add these comments.
Yeah,
So
I
what
think
I'm
that's
hearing is,
exactly-
yeah, it says that you support the bylaw, but you don't support the proposed clinic location or a proposed development plan on lot
Site,
three.
yeah, site.
yeah, the site interview
Site.
Yeah.
Right.
pieces.
I mean, it looks to me topographically like there's some real challenges with what's being proposed there anyway. There's a kind of a big flat plate
Yeah.
overlay over some topography that's pretty wild. So let's just go back to some of the ideas. So one of the issues, one of the concerns is the organization of the site plan with the building set back from the road and all the parking, municipal parking and the building parking all being adjacent to the road. So we'd like to see an alternative that takes some or all of the parking away from the road edge in some fashion or other. David?
Or the barriers.
I mean, what this means is, once you're past the police station, it's all parking. This is the main street of Bowen Island,
Right,
that, for the next 100 years, and it's a giant parking lot.
right.
And so I question the whole thing, and I have done before. Why, for instance, do we need to pave an acre for a fire hall? I mean, I looked at all the fire halls, I looked at all the fire halls up the coast, and none of them use an acre. None of them have, no, I think there's one that goes in and out. But,
Right.
I just feel the whole thing is unfortunate.
I just have the terms of reference here. I don't believe that, I think you have to have it be referred to the EPC from council to make those kinds of comments.
Yeah,
We went through this a couple of years ago and they're doing an amendment to the bylaw and then it would be repealed.
Well, that's a good question, because when I joined the group,
It was that,
I understood that we could also
Yeah.
take up issues
Yes.
that we were concerned about and make recommendations to council.
Yeah, they're gonna take it away and give it back.
yeah, because the terms of reference of the APC had been changed under the previous council.
That's right.
and then it was taken
And
away.
then
It was returned.
Well, it was given back to
It was
us.
given back.
The current terms of reference
Oh,
are as they originally were before,
Correct.
right, Gary?
Yeah.
So we're back
So-
to,
so
we're
we're-
back
we
to
are-
exact
we are-
terms of reference?
Yeah, so we have
Or in the original?
amended, it goes beyond simply dealing with referrals from council. We actually can provide comments of our own initiative.
Definitely.
So here's the original establishment bylaw.
Mandate. So matters referred to them by council.
Hi, David.
Hey, dude.
7:30, come on in.
So this goes back to the original,
The original.
what did they take
Can
out?
you wind it up?
Section-
They added a
seven.
section about bringing your own things in, and then they took it away again. It's my memory.
It talks
My
about,
recollection's
it's
the other way.
outlined.
It's the other way around, but this is the original though.
Well, it referred to section 7, so if we
Right.
scroll down
Yeah.
to 7,
Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
this one here.
Other matters,
Last council.
the commission may review and make recommendations to council from time to time of any aspect of the official community plan.
That was the
and
one they
land
took
use
away.
bylaw.
and
Yeah,
that's-
put
And
it
then
back,
they put it
yeah,
back.
that's right.
Okay,
So
sorry.
that to
To be
me,
clear.
at some level, opens the door for us to be able to provide some comments, as this is a land use bylaw.
You should.
I can see Daniel's.
More, I'm trying to see what the last, so Judy brought this to council, the last sort of iteration of the
Yeah. do you have
proposed
that?
lease on October 9th, and council said, council received this report as information, authorized staff to proceed with option 2, so that was the option that's staff had put up, that would provide for reduced lot size for the health center while maintaining their responsibility for the construction and maintenance of the parking with the health center foundation. So my understanding is Judy's proceeding with a subdivision based on that lot plan that was on, Steph, could you just go back to
You said which?
Sorry, one of the diagrams.
One of the items, okay.
Yeah. Let's see. That one or even the next one, maybe.
I'm curious what the relationship is between the number of spaces shown here and the parking
No, the 4 one.
bylaw.
So the number of
Because
spaces.
I
Yeah.
realize there's some of it is not really related to the clinic.
Yeah,
or-
so when the initial outline was essentially a rectangle for the medical clinic, if you imagine it going like that, straight out, it would provide, it was based on a square footage of the medical clinic.
Yeah, so
Um,
it's 40
Yeah.
square meters per space, it says here.
Yeah. So essentially, when it continued out, it would, like, they're essentially making this a parking lot, the entire front of it, would meet their land use bylaw requirements with additional spaces. So when Judy went on
So
October
this
9th,
was medical center, and then there was a slice that was parking only, and then
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
so the initial was essentially here, and then with this BIM part being essentially potential for commuter parking area and drive aisle into the housing area behind. So when Judy brought her option, she brought one that was essentially a rectangle like this, that was sort of what was brought initially to say, okay, health center, they'll put their parking on their site, it'll be accessed through the BIM site. Done. She brought one that would say, okay, we'll carve out some of it, make it sort of like this little leg here to say only, because that was essentially what was calculated to be that could fit the parking that they needed to meet their bylaw requirements. Or the third option is this, which was to say there's just going to be a small site for them. We will essentially enter into an agreement with them to build their parking lot, but we'll retain the ownership of it.
Daniel,
Yeah.
where would the current parking be? Can you circle roughly
It
where
goes
that is?
roughly, like if this is about the cleared line, so the current parking comes in roughly here, circles around and comes out somewhere, I guess it comes out, does it come out opposite yeah, right opposite this, so this is the ambulance
Okay.
driveway. So, and it doesn't go all the way back, it probably goes back to about in here somewhere.
So reading between the lines, would it be true to say that the current distribution of program elements on the site is due to just going with this option? That they are not necessarily interested in being at the back?
They are very interested in being in the back.
Okay.
So when we met with the medical clinic and the housing, it was essentially trying to outline, okay, council at that point had given, the house clinic had come with this, they'd come saying, we want this next chunk of land that's this big. And then Birch had come to say, we want the rest of it, essentially. And so it was trying to meet with them to figure out how can the site work better together. And so when it was, okay, do they go along Miller? And they definitely wanted to be at the back. That was consistent throughout.
So basically, this currently has all three buildings, the housing, the medical center, and the fire hall in line along the back.
The fire hall is further forward. The fire hall is essentially a fire truck length back from the
Okay.
property line.
Right, because of the turn.
So essentially the fire hall goes, right in here,
So where is their firefighter parking?
behind. Some on the side, like some on one side, I believe,
Top and the back.
and then in the back.
There are no provisions in the bylaw, or in this bylaw, or this property, to provide any buffer along the road,
It's in a development permit area,
right? So it could be.
which does have landscaping requirements.
Do you know what the landscaping requirements are?
I mean, the guidelines, I don't have them in front of me,
Right, so there.
but definitely the periphery talks about, the parking be screened from the street.
Sorry?
It sort of talks about parking being screened from the street. I mean, having said that, that's our
Like,
guidelines for
with the
all
little
essentials,
fence
like
or
the
something.
general
well,
store, and
That's a reason.
whoever else
Right.
has the same requirements.
But would you, if there was a row of trees along the front, that screen the parking and the building was at the back, would you still want the, because usually medical buildings aren't gonna be very attractive, so maybe trees would be nicer, or sort of.
Well, wait a minute.
Yeah,
I'm in the business of making even medical buildings beautiful.
I know, but-
Don't ask an architect that.
But you're not necessarily gonna design it.
No, that's probably
No.
true.
So, but, the general store, whether it has parking in front or not, in my opinion, both are just as ugly. So, but that's a personal opinion. So that's why, maybe a screen of trees, if that's what's wanted, is a safer bet. Anyway, I am not an architect, as you know, but I'm just wondering whether it's just to look at things, or you want the building in the front.
Well, I think there's two things. I mean, I think a little bit, I think coming from Martin's comments, the questions there, it's a little bit, if the medical center is adamant about being in the back, and presumably they're adamant about being in the back so they can have nice offices that look out into the forest,
Yes.
But who
fine.
cares?
Well, that's nice. And there's a big need for a medical center on Bowen, so that's a given. I'm trying to see if there's a middle ground here. I mean, if the building must be at the back, and I think the only reason it must be at the back is so that the offices get a view of the forest, and they're not looking down Miller Road. That's a bit of, I think that's a bit of, we're establishing a particular pattern of development with this. That's what concerns me. And it's like when you open the door and you say, well, once a couple of projects are built on municipally held land in a particular way, it's going to be, okay, so how we do that is we've got this strip mall mentality. And we always have the parking on the roadside, and so that's the kind of aesthetic that we want on Bowen. And for me, I'm concerned. So, yes, an alternative would be to say they must provide a 20-foot wide buffer strip and plant it with a double row of trees in such a way that parking lot is screened. It's not going to be now, then it won't be like driving down and looking at the forest, but it'll be something. It would certainly be an improvement over what appears to be proposed, which is curb stops for cars at the edge of the walking path. And that's all my concerns in a nutshell. And I'm kind of hearing we can't say any of these things. Is that correct, or?
I mean, I'm happy for you to provide comments, I just don't know if I can guarantee that if it wasn't referred as part of it, if it's gonna come back, or if,
Right,
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
There's a good likelihood that it won't.
Well,
well, we could ask.
I think there's two alternatives, and a sort of a non-architectural response might be, as you were talking about, Drew, you know, a broader, you know, buffer along there with just the entry drive that maybe has a sign saying what's behind there. But also in the parking lot, making sure that between every bay of parking, there's a line of trees and stuff that gives it canopy, cover, and gives you a little bit more sense of Bowen as opposed to more paving. And I would carry that right up, make sure that we've got that built into the design of the fire hall so that the streetscape is a lot softer than what it really is behind it. But we can still soften behind it, I think, considerably. We can design a fairly nice parking lot, but we don't want to have it as our front door to the community.
So currently it is a parking lot, and there's
Yeah.
that natural
It's
natural
nice.
bunch of trees there,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, maybe one way to do this would be just to have them keep enough of that existing growth
If
as a
possible.
buffer.
Yeah, with the
And
topography.
consider
and
that
stuff.
within the,
It's pretty inefficient, but
it's at the peak
also,
of the hill, right?
Yeah.
So,
right. But that topography is far away,
That-
unless we have a few very tall retaining walls, which we can build anyway.
That's the next item.
We're gonna talk
We
about
can
that
build-
later.
That's next.
We can build them in the setbacks, yeah.
So I would like to suggest that we craft a motion which says that the APC supports having a medical center as part of the zoning on this site, and that the APC has serious concerns about the nature of the proposed development, its physical form, and that we would like an opportunity to speak more to that.
Do we need to, so that, I mean, this will go to council, for them to understand what the concerns are? Do we need
Yeah.
something in there so that people
Okay,
will look
we
at
could-
that and say, oh, okay, I get it, or
Yeah,
or I don't?
I think going forward, this thing is rushing ahead at light year speed by any stretch of the imagination. It's gonna take a long time for the medical center to raise the funds to do what they're doing there. But maybe that would be a way going forward, is just get together with the planner before this gets too far and just say, hey, there's a better way to do this. And I think the argument is gonna be, the way we need, you know, obviously we need parking, but we can put the parking on the street and try to camouflage it, or you put the parking in the park. Because that's the concept that the people will freak out on, is all the parking will be in the park.
Well, the current park is in the park. You know,
I know,
yeah.
but not just a line of cars in the front, you know, in the front edge or that sort of thing.
I-
But that's something that has to be brought forward, because nobody that's, well, I shouldn't say nobody that's doing this planning, because they've had 4 architects involved with that part of it. This hasn't come up, that's all I'm saying. That, to my knowledge, I wasn't party to those discussions. Anyway, that's what they came up with, and I'm sure that they would respond to some flexibility, I would like to think, anyway. I don't think the thing's set in stone.
Right.
And I don't know, what do you think the urgency is here?
Well, if the architects are working on
Yeah.
buildings, it's fairly urgent if we get.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
Like, my understanding is, right, Judy has council direction to start it, to proceed with the subdivision. and
Well,
lease
that's-
agreement.
Yeah, that's correct.
So she's crafting a lease agreement with the medical center, and she's preparing a subdivision. I think Raj is, as acting as BIM applicant, has applied for the subdivision based on the council direction on this layout.
Yeah, I would like to see some kind of indication of how Birch is proposing, what they're proposing there in terms of buildings for housing, because, I mean, that line can be changed up and you can curve units around and you can do a bunch of other stuff. Oh,
I mean, they're-
they've got a plan.
They're much more conceptual, so that was what was in Judy's
That's
report.
what I was trying to get up on the screen, yeah.
Where is it?
It's in the October 9th
Tonight?
council agenda.
Which of course is just a glossy
Yeah,
Yeah.
so really all Birch has done at this point is like a layout.
That shows the clinic there as well.
Yeah, it shows the clear, so. that's- I think
Yeah,
that's
okay,
what it
yeah,
is.
Enormous amount of parking.
Mhm.
I mean, they probably wouldn't build a building that long straight, but they maybe would,
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a series
Yeah,
of.
it's a series of,
And, you know, it looks like, yeah,
Given the linear aspect of that portion of the site, it makes sense to locate them in a line,
yeah.
just to fit everything.
just
But
search for
they have a chunk of land to the south, it looks like that they're not.
Oh,
there.
Lot 3 coordination follow-up.
Is it the first one or the
Right
second?
there.
The top or the PowerPoint?
That was in the report, is where I got the image from,
Report.
it's probably in the PowerPoint too.
But, I mean, yeah, it looks pretty nice. This is when it's presented like that, it's like, it's green all over the place. and-
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
but that might not be reality.
that's in the first few months of architecture school.
Yes, yeah.
Because the reality is that looks like there's a bit of a cliff in here.
Right there.
Yeah, there's that high spot.
Actually, we weren't allowed to use color at U of T.
No color.
That explains a lot of things, actually. So, this conceptual sketch
That's some nice trees.
has a nice tree buffer shown along that bench.
Yeah.
However, this conceptual sketch was done by Birch Housing, and these aren't there, or how did this arrive?
You know,
Yeah, it's Robin's sketch.
Right.
yeah, you know, the other thing is that access drive down servicing the residential units could have parking on both sides of that drive, and you could get a whole bunch more parking in there, if say commuter parking.
If you don't want
Put
to,
parking in here too.
Yeah. And then there's, I mean, you could even go down further, there's that big green thing. It doesn't look like it's that efficiently used. So hardening the boundaries for everything at this point, I think we may lose the flexibility to actually come up with a better resolution and a greater amount of parking in a more pleasant environment. That's the thing that concerns me. We're sort of rushing in, hardening lines and people
Agreed.
going off
Yeah.
designing buildings and stuff, but yet, I think this should stay fluid for a while.
I think
before
there should
we
be some kind of
subdivide.
recommendation come out from the APC that it probably, there might be better ways to do things here.
To make
and
the
whether
view
whether
from
you
the
can get
street
together
prettier.
with, you know, Judy and the other people and say, hey, this isn't working as well as it should be perhaps.
But you have to say why, like
Yeah.
it's a prettiness from the street issue as opposed to.
Well, a prettiness from the street, but also an efficient and attractive layout for that, the community lands in there to get to maximize commuter parking, attractiveness, and streetscape appeal, and something like that.
Yeah, I know that the medical clinic does want to be on that back side, but
That's, I think we can accommodate that.
Well, whatever, they're not really coming from a position of strength. If we want to move them forward a bit, we could move them forward a bit, I don't know, it's just, like I say, I wasn't privy to all the conversations that went on to come up with this sort of plan here, so,
it's
I
kind of,
don't know how much
just
flexibility.
to like put it in some kind of context. A long time ago, even before we were kids, city developments had the typical North American approach was streets and lanes. And the lanes became the access points to garages.
Correct.
And then along came sprawl and the burbs, and everybody said goodbye to lanes, and now everything's accessed off the roads. So now instead of having houses facing the roads, you have garages facing the roads. And it totally changes the streetscape. That's an example. Las Vegas is another classic example of putting the parking, you have road, you have parking, you have
Yeah.
building.
Yeah.
And so you end up with this kind of sea of asphalt
Yeah.
everywhere. And that's a very, very kind of urban and nasty urban kind of approach to things. It seems a shame that we would even be contemplating going down that road with our own municipally held lands, that we wouldn't be taking a real kind of approach of wanting to foster a relationship with the land,
yeah.
right? And actually saying, no, we don't want to be like the worst of the cities and suburban sprawl. We want to do things differently.
Yeah.
We want people to think about stuff and not land it and do it in the most simplistic way possible. It's hard for me. I've been getting the feeling that we're not really being heard very much at council, so I'm not quite sure whether, how much.
Maybe a new council.
I recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
Large.
One way to do that.
Right. I suggest I think everyone's expressed their concerns. I'm hopeful that the council will hear those concerns. I'd like to couch them into a motion as a.
I would make a strong recommendation that, that this is revisited.
I think we want to revisit it, but I think we also want to say why.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to say what.
So,
Do you want to hear what I have now?
yeah, please.
Okay, so the commission supports bylaw 468 to amend this bylaw to increase the term in the clinic, blah, blah. And the commission has serious concerns regarding the siting of lot 3 and recommend the council direct staff to refer building locations to the commission for comment.
I'd say something about like development siting on lot
Any
3.
words that
Yeah.
the
Lot
planners
3
use.
is not changing its location.
So it
So
was
what I had written was the concerns about the development's relationship to the streetscape.
Well,
those are good
and-
words.
So, those, is
Well,
that clear enough?
well, that's one issue. The
Yes.
other issue is a more effective and attractive way to use the land that's available. And I would include, consequently would recommend no action on subdivision of properties until an overall site plan is worked out. This is not really a site plan. I mean, I don't have any problems where a housing is going.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but while I hear what you're saying, there's neither a development permit process, I don't believe, is there a DP process?
There is a DP process.
There is it for design?
Yes.
It is for design.
It's in the Sun Cove development permit area.
Oh.
So there's a DP. Yeah, so it's like,
But those guidelines were written in 1973.
I think they're 85. We just found a draft.
I
I was even alive then.
85.
But
But what this
yeah,
issue.
so I think if your main issue is the siting of it
Yeah.
and not wanting to subdivide, I would focus on that
Right.
and say that's your main. Because if you say there's no site plan, council, well, this is we have a sketch layout, we're moving forward with it, right? There is people thought about it, we've done
I
it.
think
Whereas you're
it's
more saying
about-
you don't like
It's
what
about
they're-
the siting of buildings
Yeah.
and parking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the relationship of the development to the
Yeah.
street.
Yeah, I would stick with that. as
I
your-
don't have
Siting.
problems
Yeah.
with the general location of the uses as much as it looks like we're losing an awful lot of
Right.
opportunity for
Yeah.
parking and,
And unfortunately, I don't think the APC really has a mandate to dig too deeply into the design aspect. That's why I was asking,
Yeah.
unless if there are design guidelines attached to the,
this is a planning issue. The planning layout of this site, there's certainly design overtones, but this is really a planning issue.
Maybe citing an example, like Glen Eagles comes to mind, how the community center building is positioned relative, right next to the road, parallel to the road with, even though the parking is also next to the road, it actually disappears into the landscape.
because it's not a sea.
Yeah, it's not a sea of it, it
Yeah.
dissipates, it has a buffer. So, even that example in itself could flag some of these issues.
Yeah, because they also have, there are landscape buffers in that zone as well, right? Because I think there's two strategies. One is getting the building as close to the street as we can, so that there is some relationship between building and road, and also to soften that edge too. How are we doing, stuff?
The APC has serious concerns about the development's relationship to the streetscape and the siting of buildings and parking, and the APC recommend that council refer building locations allowed for each of the commission to work on it.
I
I'd say
think
No.
the lack of
reconsider.
integration, the opportunities for integration that seem to be not there, or not taken best advantage of.
Yeah.
It's, it's sort of an interesting one, David, because the uses are quite disparate. Fire halls and housing and the clinics, and each has a different kind of parking relationship, and there are various things, the fire hall is a destination for no one except firefighters.
Yeah.
Right. And the building beside is a destination for everyone potentially.
Yeah. But,
And the
but
housing.
parking for a fire hall is usually empty. It's needed in emergencies.
Right.
In emergencies, you know, I don't know if you could, it just seems to have all that parking for the fire hall, when it's mostly going to be empty. In their emergencies, surely there are other ways of handling an emergency so that there's immediate parking available. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. You need all those spaces available at any point in time. You can't be just moving cars that are there, and
No,
that sort of thing. So that's where that difficulty
Yeah.
lies. I don't, I wish there was another way to do it, because it seems like a
Yeah.
horrible waste. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody
Do
understands
they
that.
need it for emergencies? Because some of them are gonna go to the other fire hall and some of them are gonna go to this
They're
fire
not,
hall.
they report to they report to the main fire hall, they need to go to the auxiliary,
Yeah.
they come to this one, this is where their gear is, and if they need to use the second fire hall, they go from this fire hall to the second.
So
of
in
the
their
main
car.
fire. Or in the trucks.
So there's no trucks
but
in
they-
the other one?
I don't know, I think there's additional equipment in the next one, but basically they report to the main fire hall, like when there's in a call, all the volunteers are supposed to report to the main fire hall, that's where their gear is, and then if they travel subsequent, they would travel after
That's,
that.
if they're on the west side,
Yeah.
that's 10 minutes in, 10 minutes back
Oh, yeah.
out.
And that was-
If you don't even stop, it's 20 minutes, half an hour.
Well, that's why I was
at least.
wondering, is it really the parking they need for meetings? Anyway, I know nothing about it.
And so I know
but
part of the rationale when we were meeting with the architect and trying to say, do you need all that parking, was essentially because it's a volunteer fire department, it actually takes more parking than because it's not staffed full-time, so people
I
can't
toured the
there.
fire halls
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the scouts, and it's used quite a lot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, but David, to your point, I think, can you state that again, and we'll add that as a third point?
It was a lack of integration, well, or they not taking, I was sort of hearing Dennis, we've got sort of three uses, they're completely separate, they're separate pieces of property. And housing and clinics, I know, there's lots of houses above commercial areas and
Yeah.
clinics.
No, there are fire halls in residential
No.
areas, it's kind of
Fire halls is sort
Fire
of
halls.
a done deal. There's not much we can do about it, except
Although,
push for
on
some
the fire
good
hall,
landscaping against
we-
the road.
When
Yeah.
we were looking into the fire hall back a year or two ago, so I looked and checked and looked at the size of every fire hall up the coast, in Roberts Creek and Seashell, none of them are an acre, none of them,
the sites, right?
no. The Seashell is tiny, and I presume
How
they're all
many fire halls are there?
I only saw one, but maybe I was wrong, there was one at Roberts Creek.
Anyway, it's still.
Anyway, yeah. But I was really hearing what you were saying, Drew, about the setting. I mean, this is, obviously we need a fire hall, obviously we need a clinic, obviously we need housing. And you need to talk to the experts. The experts, they're working on it, they know more than we do. But at the same time, it's our land. And this is setting a
Precedent.
precedent for how we
that's
use
the
our land.
important part of it, is
So, if I were in the clinic, I'd want to be beside the forest and not beside the street. But I'm not sure, I'm not wanting to criticize anybody, obviously, but, we also have to work together. It is our land, and we're setting precedent for how our land is used. It needs to be, this is the center of our village for decades and decades.
Right. So, how how is our,
Yeah, sorry,
So-
not helping you.
So I don't have a noun for David's, but it says that ABC has serious concerns about the development's relationship to the streetscape, the siting of buildings and parking, and the lack of integration of
the uses?
the uses. That's what I have.
Yeah,
Good,
that's perfect.
Planning speak.
yeah.
And the last one is the ABC recommend that council reconsider or direct staff, because it's
Well,
No, I think if, you're asking council to
Council.
reconsider.
the site plan and refer the reconsideration to the commission.
well,
Yeah.
the draft subdivision plan, don't, you know, I
Draft.
don't act on the draft subdivision plan. That needs to evolve. We can draw those lines anytime.
Just go reconsider, you're asking them to reconsider their subdivision plan and to refer to the APC.
So are there consultants actually working actively on this right now, or architects?
I think it's more for the business case, would you say, Daniel, or not?
No, so based on council direction, Judy is, like, we've started a subdivision file
Yeah.
for the subdivision. Judy started it and started work on the lease agreement with the medical clinic.
So if
Okay.
if the parcelization changes from this to the other proposed one, the medical center will, by default, be off the road.
Yes,
So it's at this very stage, we need to
yeah,
be thinking about what
Agreed.
the built fabric is gonna look like.
yeah.
So that's what it concerns. I don't know whether we need to get into how the referrals are working and everything else, and, you know, we'd like to see it again. That's,
So I think, do you want to, like, I
Prior
guess, my
to-
question is, do you want to see bylaw 468 again? Or is it, no, you want to talk about the health clinic again?
No, it's just, it's the citing and
Is- I think everybody can be working on the bones of the lease agreement and all that stuff. Just don't
Draw
harden it
lines.
until we get some clarity on the architecture and stuff. I mean, that's fine for this stage in time. Just, we have some concerns about it and take that into consideration, and let's harden it at a time when there's more clarity on the buildings and stuff.
yeah,
That's-
I think, Dennis, while I generally support what you're saying, I don't believe that that's how this process is unfolding. I think the process is unfolding the other way. The diagram is leading the car.
Yeah,
And that I think is part of the problem.
that's the problem.
It's like, because from the diagram, you know, diagram's a diagram, but if the diagram is the bylaw, we know, this is one option, the other's the other option, we know where the medical clinic's gonna be. And so it's a bit tricky, because there's a wish here, if we support the uses, that's the only question that was really brought to us. They can put the rest of it aside and go ahead and approve this, and then whether we see it again or not, you know, it's gonna develop as it's gonna develop. And I think it's an unfortunate, but that is my understanding of how the process is gonna unfold. Is that not correct?
Sort of the way it looks,
Yeah.
unless,
Because this is not the proposal. The proposal is the other diagram with the
Yeah, can you scroll down?
parcelization.
Well, this
Yeah.
was, when Judy came, she brought essentially 3 options, so council
So this
chose
is
option
one
2
with
for
the
that
other
option,
Right.
yeah.
So this is the one that is currently
This
before
is the one,
council.
yeah.
We get one, and we've been asked to look at this
Yeah.
and say yes to having a,
No, Drew, so you, the referral for you was the land use bylaw referral, which is a separate report from Judy, an earlier report,
okay,
right? And at the same time, council is discussing subdividing land that they own.
but the amendment to the land use bylaw is simply including medical center
Yeah.
on the parcel.
Yeah.
However, you put the picture on the screen. Because this is the
Yeah.
challenge, because while you're telling us that that's the case, so we're only permitted to comment on the land use bylaw.
No, I was saying you're asking what the process is, so I'm saying the
Right.
process is you referred, so if you're saying, is it gonna come back to you again?
Right,
Well, no, in terms of it, at October 9th meeting, council said, proceed with that option as a subdivision.
so council's already effectively said, this
Yeah,
particular
so-
parcelization is fine.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, in your motion, if you don't agree with that, say, ask them to reconsider it and ask them to refer it to the
Mhm.
ABC.
Okay.
Which is what you've done, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
All right,
okay.
so we don't know how it will land, but.
Yeah, and my cautionary note to you, Dennis, was simply that there's a possibility that that parcelization will stand. And so some of our commentary will be effectively meaningless.
Well, and that's the question is the parcelization, and that's the issue. I mean, those are hard lines, and they're drawn by an engineer as opposed to anything else. And you could see in the site plan, illustrative site plan, that there was land not used. It was not, you know, that they basically took little templates and plunked them down, and it doesn't reflect a good use of that important resource, which is the community lands. We're trying to harden up the boundaries before we actually work out a lot of the details.
Well, I don't know how much work's been done on the design work for the medical center. 1 story, 2 stories,
Yeah.
how much volume is it actually gonna take on the piece of property? I think the idea was that just designate a piece of property for that, and the rest of this stuff is, as far as parking design and stuff, I don't know how hard set that is. Danny, what do you think? I mean, that seems to me like it could be fairly flexible.
I would say, no, it's all conceptual at this point.
Yeah,
I mean, the medical clinic's architects had done a couple different layouts. The 1 is 2-story option, and so that was what was based off of what their land
Yeah.
requirements are for this. I mean, the
All we're
medical
talking about right now is just subdividing this piece of property for the medical center. So the only question is, do we take it out back away from the park, or do we leave it up against the park? Because the rest of the stuff, nothing's been designed in here by any stretch or here. So that could all change.
Well, we don't, but you've told them that, yes, you can have land for your center,
Yes.
and so.
And it's not gonna have parking, it's only gonna have your immediate parking, and so therefore
Just
you
the
will
parking
have.
requirements, the only thing that's
Yeah,
gonna be
you are
in
gonna
that
have
piece of property.
.1428 hectares, where it sits on the site, we don't know yet.
Yes, and
Isn't that what we wanna say? That's what we want? We're happy that they have that much property, and that they only have their own, you know, the 10 parking slots or whatever they have to provide. But whether it's there or on the road, or that's what we think we want to talk, we want them to come back to us about.
Well, I think from their perspective, what they're looking for is a defined piece of property that they can take to the bank.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in essence, for the health clinic, they need the lease. So to have a lease, they need a
Sorry,
subdivision.
David Rich
so-
has been trying to
Yeah.
say something for
Oh, I
a
didn't-
while.
Has the actual area for the fire department, is it fixed?
Yes.
It's approved, every square foot of it that they want?
Yes.
And how many parking spots?
36, I think.
Okay. I just think of my experience in Vancouver, there are an awful lot of fire departments that have room for 4 or 5 cars,
Yeah, they also have a lot more fire halls,
and they're small fire
22
houses.
fire halls or something like that.
But they don't have 36 parking lots. Well, So they're not volunteer apartments in Vancouver. I realize that, but 36, do we ever have a fire where we have 36 cars, 36 individuals needing a place to park while they go out on the fire trucks? That's almost as one for every volunteer in the island.
Oh, that's what it is.
I think-
But they don't all come to
I
a
think the
fire.
parking requirement came about as a function of the design of the building. Is that correct? It came from the architects or did it come from the zoning?
It comes from the fire department.
That's what
Fire
they want.
underwriters.
Yeah, so it's not the zoning.
And it's not the architects. It's the fire
I mean, I don't know if it comes from the, yeah,
department said we need 36 stalls.
For volunteer.
yeah,
But,
Yeah, for their-
And where does that number?
where does that come
that's their
from?
roster. That's their roster, like that's their fire department.
So that assumes that all members of the fire department are out to fight a fire. They've all come, each of them in their own truck, basically.
Well, you know, really, if you look at it, if you take 4 stalls away, if you take 10 stalls away, is it really gonna make that much of a difference?
Well, the thing
Well,
is
of
that
the overall scale of things.
what about the possibility of the ones on the east side being made available shared for parking for the clinic?
No, because then there'd be, if they needed the parking, they'd have a whole bunch of people parked there that were in the.
They have to be available 24/7,
Yeah,
David,
yeah.
that's the problem, the parking for the.
Essentially,
it's
it's
just
discussion
an
with the fire hall architect, it's that they be available and that the entrance be
Clear.
segregated essentially, so they don't want
Clear.
volunteers coming in to respond to fire as.
I mean, there's
to
lots
the
of.
grand
Other
city
people are
development.
leaving, yeah.
So I think there should be a single access building and that the parking should be behind it, but that's a whole other conversation.
That's done
So-
wrong, yeah.
Yeah.
So, how are we doing with that?
So, it's the same as before.
Okay.
Serious concerns about the development's relationship to the streetscape, the siting of buildings and parking, and the lack of integration of uses. And Commission recommend that council reconsider the draft subdivision plan and refer the reconsideration to the commission for comment. I think
All right.
it's-
That sounds good. And,
Move that.
Yeah, I'm happy with it.
David is moving that. Do I have a seconder? David Rynch. Any further discussion? Hopefully not.
Yeah.
All in favor? Opposed? We are unanimous.
It's like an annual thing.
Did we
for you
deal with
guys.
the wording?
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
The one we came here?
Kevin's
Yeah, they're
familiar of it, I guess, too.
We didn't actually answer.
No, it was in-
No,
voted
no,
on it.
section 1, I just didn't read it out again.
Yeah.
You have support,
You
maybe I
support
should
it,
write that
yeah.
actually,
It's,
because I've read it so many times, I can read
Yeah.
that properly.
should we just read the whole thing
Okay.
so everyone knows what they voted on?
Sorry, the Advisory
Sorry.
Planning Commission support bylaw number 468, 2018, to amend the land use bylaw to permit medical clinic as a permitted use in the Village Commercial 1-VC1 zone. And, all the other stuff,
yeah.
not reading it again.
That's it.
That's all you get.
And now moving backwards to business arising from the minutes, we're going to take that land use bylaw.
Yeah.
We're going out the window.
So, as part of this project to look at the land use bylaw and sort of housekeeping updates, the next section I wanted to look at was this section we have that's called setback exceptions. So, yeah.
Before we,
Yeah.
can you give us a little bit of an update of the stuff that we talked about last time, building height and
Yeah.
those things? Is there some, where does that stand now?
So what I'll do is I'm gonna sort of, I'm hiving off sections and we're sort of referring it to other departments to say what do you, particular bylaw, what areas of the land use bylaw are problematic for you?
Right.
And then it'll all go in one report to the council to say, these are essentially the scope of housekeeping stuff. So I haven't done anything with that in terms of bringing it to council, but I'll bring a whole series of stuff to council and say, these are all the housekeeping things I want to address.
Great,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
That's good. So we have essentially one section of the land use bylaw that lays out things that can project into a setback. So every zone has setbacks, so side yard setbacks and front yard setbacks, and then we have these essentially three things that can project into setbacks, different distances. So that's on page 8 of your package. So projections into setbacks, and then we have a whole list of things that are exempt from setbacks, and some are exempt from all setbacks, and some are exempt from certain setbacks and not other setbacks. It gets quite convoluted, but essentially we have these three things, and partly I was looking for Troy Martin's comments on so we allow things like bay windows, chimneys, cornices, eaves, gutters, heating or ventilating equipment, sills, or other similar architecture features to go 0.6 meters in. We then allow roof overhangs to go 0.9 meters in, and then we allow canopies, sunshades, decks, essentially used for decks, 1.25 meters into a setback. And the question I've always had when I've looked at this is,
What's the difference between between eaves, gutters, and overhangs?
yeah, that's exactly my question.
Right.
I always go.
Yeah.
And so I was sort of looking at, when I had Sarah pull all different examples and see if that's the common thing, and I don't see it, and I don't know. Yeah.
I think.
How can we make it simple?
Yeah.
Simple.
Well, I'm most familiar with the gutters and eaves, and the roof overhangs seems to me.
Yeah. I don't quite know where it came from, and when an eave is not a roof overhang,
Right.
I was like, is that a,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like an
Yeah,
architect
in
thing.
other bylaws that I've read, that the gutters and eaves is the terminology I'm most familiar with.
Yeah.
And canopies, sunshades, unenclosed balconies, unenclosed decks, unenclosed stairwells, patios, porches, 1.25 meters. It almost seems like Well, yeah, that's under
Roof over
4
hangs,
feet,
basically.
and you talk about a balcony, that means the balcony itself is gonna be, you know, maybe 3 feet in depth. I mean, that's not big enough to put a chair on or do anything, so
4 feet.
why,
Well, you could even cantilever
Well-
a 5-foot balcony. And if your building face is set back 1 foot from the setback line, you could,
but then you've got a railing, which is gonna be a certain depth.
right.
So that makes the net usable. Not
So
very
when
much.
we're talking about the part which is encroaching.
Yeah, you don't have to build up to, you don't have to put your wall at the
Right.
setback line. And then,
Yeah.
So you could, the
You could
building
have a
face
fence
could
like
be
that.
back 2 feet from that and
Yeah.
project,
Yeah,
encroach further. Balconies can encroach further.
yeah, yeah.
So that's actually fairly common.
It would be on small lots, and the kind of lots we have, I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense. We have, yeah, on a lot of our zoning, our setbacks are 7.5 meters.
Our rural lots and our settlement lots the side lots are 3, side setbacks are 3 meters.
Okay.
So the SR2, so all of like Deep Bay or Miller's Landing or Valhalla or anything, it's all blue water, it's all 3 meters side.
Oh,
setbacks,
okay.
And 7.5 front and back.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so what's the rationale for the different okay, we'll ditch the roof overhangs because we don't know what those are compared to.
Yeah.
But why do we allow balconies, decks, and so on to stick out further? Is there any reason why they should stick out further?
They're unenclosed, so they don't really have a volume to it.
But from a privacy perspective, they're where people hang out. They're
Yeah, it's-
right close to the side yard.
Mhm.
yeah, so, yeah, I would tend to not allow them.
I mean, I would say, so why do you allow like roof overhangs or stuff? Is because people are gonna build up to the setback, and you don't allow a roof overhang, you're gonna end up with a wall with no overhang,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right? And so you allow the overhang, because then you say, okay.
They're important
Yeah,
for
yeah,
climate, definitely.
Yeah,
that's, that and chimneys.
I have a
uh,
different question about this.
I also have a different question.
Are any of these terms defined?
Yeah, they need to be defined.
no. No,
Okay, so I think that's an important oversight, because if they're not defined, I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna build a porch that projects 4 feet into that side yard, and you can't stop me, and I'm gonna tell you the porches have roofs on them.
The porch is what?
Have roofs on
Porches.
them, that's what a
Yeah.
porch is.
Yeah.
That's my definition of a porch. In fact, I could probably look that up in a dictionary
Yeah.
and prove it to you. So I think if we're going to have these allowances, we need to define what these things are. I know that actually adds a lot of text to the bylaw, and it isn't actually doing what Kirsty's asking for, which is simplification, but I think it's important. I think that's one of the problems with the land use bylaw in general, is there aren't enough defined terms. And so you're left constantly having to define them or determine what the intent was some 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that can be inherently problematic.
I've got a book for you with zoning definitions.
I also wondered if there should be a limit to what a bay window is. Often in bylaws, there's a limit.
A limit to like,
How wide?
Yeah, they have that. I forget.
So, you know,
yeah, a few things
I
do.
could build a 30-foot
Yeah.
long bay window.
Well, like those ones you were talking about when you wrote them up there,
Yeah.
you know, how you can extend them with not full height,
Yeah,
and then they're not part of the floor.
Yeah, like Gibson says, it's less than
It was
2.5
Gibson.
meters long and
Yeah.
covering not more than 50%
Yeah,
of
that's
the wall or
pretty
something.
common.
Yeah,
That's
just to say,
huge.
yeah, which makes
Now,
sense.
of course, you can get around that one by having two side-by-side
Yeah.
pieces, but
So I also had a question about, has the ability to allow encroachment into setbacks for the purpose of additional building envelope components like insulation, be allowed in order to improve overall energy performance of structures.
Yeah, so what we talked about last meeting was our floor area definition, which currently measures to the outer walls, and then we measure to the outermost walls and we deduct 15 centimeters from that measurement. And so what we talked about last time was measuring to the inside of the walls for our floor area as a way to allow, like currently we don't incentivize.
And
thicker
then a wall
walls.
thickness doesn't get added into, it doesn't
But are
become
you
part of the
talking
floor.
I'm talking about the
Renovations.
setbacks.
Exceptions, yeah.
Renovations, and then instead of putting stuff on the
Well,
inside,
even
you
new
wanna
build
have
as well.
Yeah.
on the outside.
But we do have some small properties
Do
here.
you know of examples where they, because I start to worry that,
Vancouver has,
we measure the setbacks, right, so that, like you do your survey, you say that's where the outside of the wall is, and we start saying, well, the outside, but then you can be a little bit closer.
Does Vancouver do it for side setback, in the setback as
Yeah,
well?
they do.
Okay. Remember that.
Can you send me examples?
Sure.
That's good.
Is that Metro Vancouver?
No, just
No,
COV.
City?
I noticed the town of Golden has a setback for bay windows, giving defined distances, a meter into the front rear setback.
Yeah, I noticed some places too, they do it differently, they break it up, they say, your deck can go 1.25 meters into your front, but it can only go a lesser amount to the side or something like that.
In
Like you-
some ways, I think there's some sense in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of sense in
Because
that.
we have pretty deep front and backyard setbacks.
Yes.
Right.
At 25 feet or
Yeah.
24 feet and 7 inches. So, I could see giving a greater relaxation to an unenclosed deck into a rear yard.
Yeah. Yeah, because it makes sense, because so in the Stud Cove house lots, their side setback, I think, is 1.25 meters. So people have asked, and they say, well, gee, I can put my deck up to the lot line, because I get 1.25 meter deck setback, right? So why not?
Right.
So, yeah, so things like that, we're saying, well, maybe you can only eat to your side a proportion of that. Like, it's one thing in the rural lots where it's 25 foot, 7.5 meter side yard setback as well. It's different than a 3 meter side setback.
But this is for no matter if it's city lots or rural?
Yeah, this is, yeah.
But this
across
is
all our zones.
island-wide,
Yeah.
it's for all, these are exemptions, so they apply to every zone.
Yeah, because it just doesn't make a whole bunch of sense if you, yeah. if
That's
you-
typically how bylaws are written, though. They have these blanket exemptions.
Yeah,
I forget we have large lots because I live on Lenora, so.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
being-
you could always put in, some of these setbacks, or that, the overhangs or whatever, or whatever's less, if you have the tighter zoning with
Yeah.
the narrow side yards and stuff.
Yeah.
I had some issues with exempted building structures and features.
Sure. Does anyone have any comments before
No.
about the projections, or I can go on to the second part, which is the exempted building structures?
Well, are there any questions you have of us? I mean, certainly I think we can simplify, that's what you're wanting to do, is simplify it in terms of dimensions. And that seemed like a lot of,
Do you have any
what the
issues?
architects-
So the issue, I would say, the number one issue I have,
Yeah.
and I don't know if this is retaining walls less than 2.5 meters in height or permitted
Yeah.
anywhere. So that's an 8-foot for retaining wall is permitted, and so some of our setbacks, so the accessory buildings can be cited, if you're a small accessory building, like a little shed, or a little wooden shed or whatever, can be cited up to any lot line, but it's still subject to setbacks from seas, lakes, wetlands, and stuff like that. So
Correct, yeah.
whereas our 2.5 meter retaining wall can be built anywhere.
Right,
You can build a 200, if you have a large waterfront, you can build a 200 foot long.
I like the way
8-foot
District of North Down does it. Their maximum is 1.25,
Yeah.
1.2, and they have a specific minimum distance from one to the next. You see the challenge here. is you could have 8-foot retaining wall and a foot over another 8-foot retaining wall and a foot over another 8-foot retaining wall, and suddenly you've got a 24-foot high retaining
So
wall.
what we have, Drew, is we do have a distance, we have a 1.2 meter distance for structures apart, and then how we measure the retaining wall is from the natural grade.
Right.
So we would say if somebody came with a plan where they had a retaining wall and they backfilled and they put a retaining wall, we would say, what's your natural grade? Like, what was it? You can't say you're gonna build a wall and backfill it and build a wall on top of your back.
So
Having
you
said
can't
that,
you can't artificially create
Yeah.
a grade and then retain.
I mean, you could if it's long enough ago, right? Like if somebody built a retaining wall 20 years ago and then they came and said, now I'm gonna build here.
Right.
I don't know if we got into a fight about saying
Uh-huh.
your natural was before you built that other wall, you need to
Yeah,
go
and
find.
so I think the real problem then is
Yeah.
more about that ultimate height of 8 feet. That's a problem.
Yeah, so our building bylaw requires a building permit if it's more than 1.5 meters high.
And we should explain, these can be
Yeah.
built anywhere on a lot, even
Yeah.
in a sensitive
Yeah.
waterfront zone
Yeah.
where no other construction
Yeah.
is permitted.
Yeah, my big concern of all of this was the bullet 4, the fences or retaining walls appear to be able to be put anywhere, like right on the waterfront.
Yep.
And it seems to me they should be in the same category as the last bullet, still subject to setback from sea, lake, watercourse, wetland. I don't know about highways, since we don't have any, but,
Highways are just roads.
okay, roads,
Yeah.
yeah. But certainly it should not, you should not be allowed to build an 8-foot wall. No. Right along the water.
Well, there's an example of that.
Yeah.
There's
Interestingly,
one,
with this one,
And there's no maximum length. So in the example I'm thinking of, that wall, when I looked at it, was 80 feet long. It was built in the setback zone from the ocean. It's 8 feet high, and there's one setback from it, also 8
Wow.
feet high, and it was 75 or 80 feet long.
Where is that?
Where is it?
I'm not telling.
Wow.
But it's not blowing up.
Okay.
Doesn't
Doesn't sound like a good
So
thing.
I'm just saying, it's an example, but it's a classic example of
stretching it.
Yeah.
of taking the rules and stretching them to, in the absolute worst way.
This property would have had a building permit granted?
Well, dude, it's a little more complicated.
it's complicated, but in essence, if somebody came with just a retaining wall, an 8-foot, 2.5 meter retaining wall for their entire waterfront frontage, and they had it engineered and whatever, they would get a building permit, right?
There's nothing in here that would stop them from getting it. So for that component of that project, actually, there was a building permit, and yes, it was an approved building permit. There were some other challenges about it, but. So it's concerning, and it's not, because this can be a huge structure. It looks pretty innocuous in here.
What do you propose, Drew? You've got.
I think actually height is the bigger issue. You can have a pretty long retaining wall, but it's only 4 feet high. It's not bad. And we're done work on 3 or 4 projects in the district of North End, similar topography to here. And they have a requirement that they are set back a certain distance if you have, if you're trying to mitigate a really steep
Yeah.
slope. So, and the plant, so if you start to get something that's quite a bit softer and less, and I guess the other thing here, it doesn't really speak here to what the retaining wall is made of. So what you see a lot of on Bowen are rock stacked walls that are very high, right? And again, I have certain feelings about rock stacked walls, but they're relatively inexpensive to build compared to a formed concrete wall.
Well, they're
They're
also
lot
more
better looking.
attractive.
They can be if they're well built.
Yeah,
Good
or they can be really ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I would be tempted to be looking at a change where retaining walls not exceeding a height of 1.5 meters. If that's the limit that we use for building
So
permits,
we make it
then
right.
that's
Yeah.
what we.
Yeah, then?
Yeah.
You all agree? Okay.
1.5, which is what, 4.5
5
feet?
feet.
5 feet?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
And then you would allow another 5 foot, maybe 5 feet back, or how
I
do you?
think it's
do
1.2 meters that
Oh.
structures have to be apart. So
I
4
think
feet.
the way it works in North Van is they take a 45-degree angle, and that would get the,
that?
5 feet, that would get you 5 feet,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
then we'll go 5 feet over.
Yeah,
Seems like a good, everyone agree with that change?
yeah,
I think he's just doing general notes for
Oh,
his
okay.
changes that would then come back.
I think so, yeah. I don't know. I didn't take motions last time. We just took sort of consensus
Yeah.
and we'll bring back.
Right.
Well, Steph and I were going to craft it to and drew into the minutes and then,
So but you're saying you can still build this retaining wall within the normal setback to the sea?
I'd like to see that taken out too,
Yeah.
personally.
So you'd like to say 1.5 meters high may be sited on any portion of the lot subject to setback from seas, lakes, water courses, and
Correct.
wetlands,
Yes.
whatever this word
Yes.
is. I don't know, whatever word
Oh,
it is.
for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm good.
Because I think another part of this challenge is you don't really know what that giant retaining wall is gonna become in the future. You know, they can say that they're using it to, retain the grade, but it becomes,
What are the
Big
setbacks
front
from, on large lots?
7.5.
7.5.
So then it has to go further. Yeah, so if you're on a small lot, you can,
Yeah, if you're on a small lot, your setbacks are less.
yeah, so, cause that whole thing just sort of makes no sense to me that it's the same rules whether you have 7.5 meters
Yeah.
setback or whatever small lots have.
So are you saying, Drew, that it should be 100 feet back from the water? The same setback as the buildings?
it's not 100 feet. The setback to the natural boundary now varies around the island.
It's 30 meters
In
as
some
an
areas.
outright, and then, it's the average of your neighbors.
Well, I know that, yeah.
And Hood Point is 15, and so it's fair weather. It's
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 15 is pretty,
But 30 is the default, unless it's
Right.
allowed to
Yeah.
go closer to 30.
yeah, it's interesting. And
It's a long way,
it is a long way.
pain in the
And-
arse.
And it was originally, it's really strange how that evolved. Like a lot of the coast, a lot of the Sunshine Coast, the setback from the natural boundary is 7.5 meters.
Good old days, the summer cottages.
And there's a triggering mechanism, like if there's a large parcel and there's a subdivision,
Mm.
then that triggers a request to double that to 15 meters.
Still-
And it's interesting because those setbacks from the natural boundary were originally established, they're they were under railways or something really weird.
Huh.
Yeah, anyway, bit of an aside, but 7.5 meters is not uncommon.
We got ours from,
So 30 meters is huge.
We're more, I remember looking at the other islands trusts, we're more than the other islands trusts. Like Galliano, I think it's 7.5 as well, and lots of them are 15.
Yeah. Yeah, and often, like on Salt Spring, they look at the geotechnical and they use the geotechnical setback, so that default is around 10 meters.
Yeah.
So should we?
I don't know, I could build with 100 foot and it was just ridiculous.
yeah,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And then if you have to, then you can't have a retaining wall even in that.
so those
Like-
Or your
particular,
covenant.
that setback from the natural boundary, well, there's a provision, there is a blanket provision, is there not?
So this is how it goes. Setback from the sea is 30 meters. It may be reduced to a minimum of 15 or a minimum of 7.5 based on a geotech, blah, blah, blah. But it's based on
Adjacent
the
property.
calculation of the average of the existing setback from the natural boundary for the sea for the principal building on the lot on either side of the subject lot. So if your neighbors are both really close,
Yeah.
you can be
It
close.
works. here.
But if there's an empty lot next door to you, that's
Yeah.
considered 100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if the lot next to you is vacant or it's a road, then it's assumed to be 30 on that side, and then you take the average of this, and you can be up in between.
So the individual zones don't have any provision. for
Like I
that.
said, Hood Point, I think is 15 by default, or can it go 7.5 with the geotech, like it's closer?
Right.
I'm trying to think where else. I feel like Seymour Bay lets you be closer, but I think that's, and then obviously Snug Cove, like the marina and stuff. But other than that, I think everywhere else is that 30 or average.
Should you think we ought to go down to 15?
I don't even think that conversation's on the table tonight, is it?
Okay,
Or-
no, that's maybe
Okay.
future discussion.
Well, I have another issue.
Okay.
And the exempt buildings and structures in the setback.
Okay.
And I would like to sort of follow the lead of some of the other communities where you don't exempt these buildings in the front yard setback. because I've got examples in our neighborhood where a shed was built right up against the street on the property line. I mean, it was low roofed so that it met the height guidelines. And the other thing that's starting to happen are people are building big fences along the property line. And I think
8 footers.
Huh?
8 footers.
Yeah, and what that's doing is it's taking away our character. I mean, you drive down the street, for everybody who drives down our roads, you're seeing what's, sort of suburbia or something. There's no buffer, people are just sort of clearing their lots up there and building fences and building buildings right on the property line. So I think, and some of the other communities have addressed that, and I just sort of say, yeah, okay, some of this stuff is exempt, but not in the front.
Well, I don't know, I'll say, because we have such a deer problem here, if you wanna have any kind of a garden, you have to have a fence.
Yeah.
And so if you say no fences,
No, or you're just saying that's 7 meters back, 7.5 meters back.
Yeah, that, unfortunately, I also live in Deep Bay. And if we had put a fence 7 meters back from our property line,
You'd be in your house.
I wouldn't have
Well, you're.
Exactly.
Are you in a 7 meter setback zone? Yeah, I think you're in a.
That's
are you?
standard.
7.5?
7.5 meters. But yeah, most people
So
then
we
the
have a
house
lot
is
that's roughly 65 by 140 feet, and it's subject to 25-foot setback front and back and 10-foot side on both sides. And it's quite constraining.
Well, maybe do you put in a lot size with that? It seems like, I can see that in small subdivisions where you've got small lots, Okay, that's not going to be a woodland-like environment. On lots that are an acre, 2.5 acres, larger, those are large lot subdivisions. They're not as site constrained in terms of being able to put stuff up there, and you can maintain a
but they may be
streetscape.
very weather, like, if you get sun in the front yard and that's where your sun is, that's where you wanna have it fenced. Like, I just, so maybe you don't want brick walls, but what the hell is wrong with a wire fence? Like, I don't know, I think we're getting too fussed up about what.
There's a practical piece here that I want to ask you, Dan, because the way the bylaws are typically set up, the front end includes these sections which are blanket exemptions or whatever, and then there are the specific bylaw pieces that are they're neighborhood specific or zone specific, and those might have slightly different provisions within them, correct?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, they could. In practice, I don't think we have. I don't think, like, none of our zones.
I'm just trying to come with Dennis's request in a slightly different way.
Yeah, but a zone could say, despite section, and I'm looking at the number here, but 3.27, which is the fence one, it could say, fences cited, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
do not be.
But you'd put it, because if you want to, because the intent is to make these general, they're general provisions. So if you wanted to do something specific for large lots, you would go to the R, whatever zone that is, and say, for these lots, irrespective of what 3.7 says, you deal with it there. So if that's something you'd like to see addressed, I think it needs to be addressed in a slightly different way. I'm not saying that I support it necessarily, but
Because I'd be sure frosted off.
I don't want to see my fence in my living room.
But if I have property, I have sheep. I don't want to not be allowed to have a fence near the road, and be pushed back into the trees. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, maybe this is more appropriately addressed in the OCP in terms of streetscaping and environmental things. I can see it's more contentious than I thought it might be.
I think the accessory building piece is an interesting one, though, in a couple of different ways. Whether accessory buildings are allowed in the front yard setback, or whether they should be, I think is an interesting question.
Like a carport, for example?
Well, this is something, this is going out in outside the other direction. I'd like to see single carports allowed in Deep Bay. Because I much prefer an attractive, open, four-poster table type carport than these
Enclosed.
temporary fabric
Oh, fabric
structures,
structures,
right?
yeah.
You know, showing up all over the
Yeah.
neighborhood. And I think there's a number of things that sort of, where the municipal bylaws sort of impact, I don't know.
They
There's a-
call
there's
us,
a-
Better be careful what you wish for, stuff,
Yeah.
eh?
Well, it's kind of like, apart from the carcinogens in the water, from the Deep Bay water, I mean, apart from that.
Apart from that, yeah.
The fact that the water, did you see the water lately, the
Yeah.
Columbia water? Well, that goes through
Like,
everybody's washing machine, it goes through everybody's dishwasher.
Yeah.
It's like, who's paying for all those appliances?
Yeah.
I don't get why people aren't more up on those about it. Anyway, that's a whole, other kind of an aside.
Working on it,
But you
working on it.
you can't protect your vehicle, and then, so then people buy these plastic tarp structures that are awful,
Yes.
so that they can have some protection over their vehicle. Why not allow single car?
Do you think are you thinking all like the SR2 zones, or are you thinking specifically like Deep Bay, because they tend to be smaller?
Yeah, I'm thinking yes.
Yeah.
Because it's,
Well,
it's otherwise impossible. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, well, Martin, do you have?
Oh, I have this, I mean, yeah, totally agree. I value my vehicles and they're getting destroyed in the rain.
Right.
To have a carport would be,
But doesn't a exempt building include a carport, accessory building structures less than 8 feet in height and not more than 10 square meters in floor area?
That's 100
100 square
That's
feet.
100 square feet, David. It's 10 by 10 feet. That's half a
Yeah.
garage, half a carport.
Yeah.
So in theory, you could have half of the carport, but the other half's got to be quite a ways back because of that. footage.
or if part of it's in the setback. and
Very
part of it's
close to
not.
me, somebody's built 2 of them side by side with
Surprise.
a cover, and it's actually 24 feet long by 10 feet wide.
No.
Nobody's done anything about that.
Has anybody complained to us about it?
Oh, yes.
Because I was gonna say, I mean, the problem I always have with this is that, so you don't need a building permit if you're 10 by 10 building,
Right.
right?
Correct.
But it's irrespective of height, so people will build a 10 by 10 that's 10 feet high, and then the neighbors complain. And then we come and look and they say, well, I didn't need a building permit, I thought I could build it anywhere. And we say,
Right.
well, no, but you're too tall, you can't win up in these silly fights about.
And these
I thought
people-
there was a height restriction.
There is.
There is in this, but there's
Yeah.
not in the, like, in our building bylaw, in the building code, right, if you build it 10 by 10 and you go over to, it doesn't matter if you're 2
Yeah.
meters high or
Oh, but not in here is what you're saying.
But in here, we do have a height limit, so if something's too tall, we say, well, you can't put it
And then you
in.
see people who've read it
In
in
this-
here, and
in the
they don't know how
setback,
building
that's
height is
all.
measured. And these
Yeah.
little squat buildings. that
Yeah,
they-
yeah,
Right? Yeah. Anyway, but that's, I mean, it's a bit of an aside, but I don't know what the process would be to change the SR2 zone to allow
Yeah.
for single
Carports.
carports.
I mean, I think I could bring it as part of this, but I think it would be a
Package, yeah.
bigger review to say, to talk to people in the
There's something, there would
SR2.
have to be some kind of public.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you would end up with the kind of urban things you don't want, carports
No, well, I
in the
don't
front
think so.
yard.
I don't think so, David, because they'd be carports. And there would have to be some very clear terms about what the carports are. Like, I see them being open on 3 sides.
Yes.
For instance. So that there really are.
Yeah, it's 60% now, and you can't go more than 60%.
Right, and I consider it even more open.
Yeah.
Just a really minimal structure. Basically, a gazebo.
A roof.
a roof.
Columns.
Right.
And then after you've got it built, you can close it.
Well,
So now, David, I never teach.
Cooking facilities, yeah. Bathroom.
Yeah, right. Guest suite.
Yeah.
In-laws.
Yeah, there we go.
Short-term vacation rental.
Yeah,
Right up.
do I do that? Is there anything else in the building structures and features?
David's got a
I know this is
Sorry, David.
a question, I know it's not been asked to do this, but is there any reason why the APC can't recommend to council that builders have to see a building permit before they can do something?
Well,
Like-
that's
like a
in the building
subcontract.
code.
Well,
There is something in there, but it's not enforced.
you know, really, in, close to me, somebody has contracted with a local builder, and they built illegal stuff right down to the water, and decks right at the beach and the whole bit,
Okay.
without any building permit. And it seems to me that a contractor who takes on this kind of a job, knowing that it's illegal and that it may well be removed if bylaw enforcement ever finds out about it,
Yeah,
should either have seen a permit so that it's legal, because he knows he's doing illegal work.
correct.
That he should have to see this or face a really serious fine and the lack of permission to be a contractor on Bowen Island.
What is
Couldn't
it,
something-
build it and seek forgiveness later?
Yeah, it's something that could potentially be, I would imagine, tied into business licenses. If there was a requisite
Yeah,
to build
absolutely.
a business license for contractors, as part of that, you know, they basically take an oath that they're going to, you know, ensure that there is a building permit taken out for the work that they're undertaking. If there's no building permit,
Basically, if you don't do it, then their business license.
right.
And that's the only,
If they have a business license or they bother getting one.
yeah, well, they have to get a business license.
But it's still enforceable by the building inspector, because it is part of the code.
But
They have to
there's no
have a permit.
consequence, at this point,
No,
there's no consequence to a builder who builds an illegal building on somebody else's property, on the waterfront, or whatever,
Well,
because he's not required to see if there's a building permit.
I think-
Only
I
the
think-
owner.
I think the real challenge, it's actually.
To have them take it down.
I'm not a lawyer, but I think if you look through the documentation that must be filled out to get a building permit, the onus always falls back on the owner, not on the
Right.
builder.
Yes.
So
Mm.
it's not really, the builder is hired by the owner to do the work. So at the end of the day, it's the owner who must take responsibility.
I know that's the case, but the
Right.
point is, the builder is engaged in an illegal activity, and he knows it, and he goes ahead and does it because he knows very well that the builder is the one who's gonna take consequences if he gets caught. The builder is free himself. The contractor, he doesn't give a damn whether it's illegal or not. There are no consequences on him.
But
Well, no, but that's correct, but there could be severe consequences on the owner.
yeah, because it's the owner that should take the responsibility. They're the ones, because whether it's a contractor or they do it themselves, it makes no sense to attack the contractors when the owner could just do it himself.
Well,
And then,
And I don't actually quite agree with you either, David. There's a, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm really clear with this, but there's a liability component to this that is
Absolutely.
significant. And the builder, you know, and when Aunt Susie falls off that deck that was illegally built and dies, that jointly and severally piece that the lawyers love to talk about, that contractor's gonna be in the courtroom with everybody else.
well,
So there is a consequence.
I'm thinking of a specific case where the person who had this decking and stairs and things built off their property, onto the waterfront, right on the water, has so much money, she doesn't give a damn. And if the municipality does find out about it and makes it removed, she can afford to do that. But the contractor, in the meantime, has made $50,000 or $60,000 building this thing knowing full well it's illegal. It's right on the water, right on the water,
Mhm.
and they don't care because there are no consequences.
Well, actually, there are for the contractor, contractually, because there, if it is built contrary to the building code, it's against the law, which means that the contract does not stand between the contractor and the owner, which means the owner doesn't have to pay them.
Well, the owner has already
And that's the
paid them
contractor's
and
risk.
doesn't care.
But the contractor should care because they may not be able to collect their payment. And they can't put a lien on the property because, again.
It's not my problem, they don't own the property.
But I guess, the bottom line is this, I guess nobody cares about it.
Yes,
Because if the neighbors went in and reported it to the bylaw officer, the bylaw officer come out, take a look at it and say, you can't do this, take it all out.
yes, exactly.
So, unless somebody says something to somebody, it's all,
And you're saying that the neighbors have complained in this village?
Yes,
oh, they have,
yes.
and nothing's happened?
Well, the tide took a lot of it away. The owner isn't in the house that much and doesn't really care and is just enjoying it through the summer and if it has to be taken out, it'll be taken out. But
And
that's-
rebuilt again.
That's not the point. The point is the contractor has built something he knew was illegal because he didn't see any building permit for it.
Yeah, I don't know.
He should
I don't think you can get them, I don't think that's ever gonna happen.
I think it's an interesting idea, David, I think but it's also a challenging idea. You're kind of asking the contractor to be a policeman and to say, no, Mrs. Smith, you can't do that and I won't build it for you, it's against the law.
Right.
Mrs. Smith's gonna go find somebody who doesn't live on Bowen Island, come and build it for her.
Yeah.
Now, we can still find the Mrs. Smith,
Right.
and that should be defined, and that's one thing we don't have a definition for.
Right.
Saying if you build something consciously illegal, and then you have to figure out a fine structure, and you say, hey, it's gonna cost you $10,000. But it's gotta be in place.
Right.
If it's not in place, it's no good.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It might be something that the building department could talk to some of the other municipalities to see if they have any requirements of builders in other municipalities that are like that. I'm not aware of there being any. My impression is it's always the onus falls on the owner.
Yeah,
And
we'll
it says,
always
yeah,
go
they
after
told me
the
they had a
owner.
permit,
Yeah, we'd always go after the owner because
Yeah.
we can go after the property as opposed to
Right,
a business which could
yeah.
shut down and reopen as a new business. But
Yeah.
Yeah. Other numbered company.
Yeah, right. 2019.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you get enough feedback on
I
that?
did, unless we had other more feedback.
I think simple is better, I think,
Yeah.
in my mind, trying to take trying to exempt different bits and pieces, just giving a blanket on the sides, a blanket on the front and back, and, I don't know, that's my thinking, they can design the house that way.
That's currently the situation, and the exemptions. They're generally consistent with how it's done elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Relatively,
If anyone has other thoughts that come at 2 o'clock in the morning,
Well,
feel free
I
to-
do.
yeah, right on.
I still have problems with being able to build a shed or a building
in the front.
in the front
I
yard.
think
I sort of agree with that, too.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'll give up on the fence. But putting a building, and cardboard for
I'm not
small
giving up on the
lots.
carport.
Oh, yeah,
That's a
no.
dream, that's true.
Yeah, yeah, I have a real problem with that.
Well, that's part of an evolution, I mean, who would have thought that you would have had all these temporary structures there? And what's the deal on those, I guess people can
Do
put
that.
them wherever they want.
I
I don't
think so.
I don't think that's the case. Like, it's not a
No.
building per se, but I would say it's probably a structure,
Structure.
in our, because we just say it's
Yeah.
constructed or supported by land,
Yeah.
is a structure.
Yeah,
So
temporary
I wouldn't know why it's
carports
not
are
a
still
structure.
governed
Yeah,
by the zoning.
yeah.
I'd much rather see carports in there than a whole bunch of trees.
Absolutely, that's my point.
Or sheds.
But I do agree with Dennis on the accessory building in the front yards. I think that's, we should go.
Yeah.
So would that cover?
That covers most.
That's the land use bylaw tonight?
That is the line of bylaws tonight.
Oh,
Next
boy.
week,
More to come.
and a new section to be determined.
Alright. And with some information items.
Do you wanna go through those?
Yeah.
Or you guys
We good?
You care, I just put them all on there for you, thinking you'll care.
Just to be annoyed.
Well, yeah. So it's the, argument drive will be the third, to each meeting.
Right.
And then
And our guests
veterans
tonight
parks.
are aware that that was not on tonight's agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the parking about and the housing reserve fund. Is established.
Affordable Housing Reserve Fund, yep.
And
And the last was about the docks.
Yeah.
And it's- So our comments were not, I'm sort of
Not
interested.
heated,
What's that?
not heated.
Not heated, no, we gathered. Do you wanna say anything about that, or?
Well, you know how I feel about it, and Walt went 4 to, as it always does, went 4 to 3, and
Right.
that's the way it came out. The thing that did get in there, which was encouraging, is you can have a neighborhood dock. A neighborhood dock. So,
Is a neighborhood dock a defined thing?
It's a community dock.
it's just, it, public.
It's a
A
public
community
dock.
dock's a different from, well, yeah, there is no neighborhood dock. Community dock is
Public dock.
open to the public.
That's our definition, so the community dock means a public dock.
Oh, interesting,
In
okay.
its entirety.
I wasn't aware of that. I thought, because I thought when we talked about it for this CRC, that it could be the neighborhood, exclusive to the neighborhood, but common.
I can call it
I know
something
we
else.
have something called a group mortgage facility, and maybe that's what was discussed.
Yeah.
The argument there was that anybody could put in a neighborhood dock.
Anybody that they didn't like.
Community dock, yeah.
Right,
So anyway, that's where it sits now.
okay.
I don't see any big changes happening there.
So,
So, and the other thing that's gonna happen, of course, is there is gonna be a map defined,
okay,
because there never was one. And so that's not gonna, the onus isn't gonna be on Daniel to decide whether somebody can put their dock there or not.
so,
So beach isn't defined and a whole bunch of other things, but hey, it's.
Is anyone gonna have